Solitudes. Ever since it was added, Parry has been one of the most controversial mechanics added in Path of Exile 2. It has received nothing but buffs over time, but no one is giving it the time of day. So I will. I will take Parry to its furthest it can go, and see if it's worth your time. The build concept is simple. We go Witchhunter, and we take all the weapon set passives. One set will be all the parry stuff, and the other will be something else. At first, the something else was spear skills, but after hitting a wall on maps, I've come to the conclusion that spears suck. At least Whirling Slash does. Then right before I was about to shelve the whole idea, I saw a lot of buzz about Quarterstaff's Whirling Assault, which turned out to be much better. But enough about that, we're here for parries, so let's get the details down. Parry is the implicit skill of the Buckler's shield type. It's a channeled skill like Raised Shield. Holding the skill down will try to parry in that direction. There is no timing involved, it's a held skill. If the attack originated in your parry range, you will block and counter with a shield bash. This shield bash will do damage in an area around the target and apply the parry debuff. The parry debuff baseline is 50% more attack damage taken and can be consumed by other skills. Despite the sound it makes, you only block the attack if you successfully parry it. In the patch notes, there's a line about how parries always hit the enemy regardless of distance. This is not talking about the parry distance, but rather the follow-up hit. I'm assuming it's to cover some edge case where enemies moved out of range before the parry could complete. Parry distance is one of the barriers to using parry successfully and can be fixed. Parry distance is modified by parry range on the tree or the unique buckler Calgyra's Arc, which grants infinite parry range. This one modifier changes the parry game entirely. We stop being Dark Souls and instead become Valheim. Projectiles from across the screen? Parried. A flamethrower? Parried. Spell on the ground cast 10 seconds ago? Parried. Since range is no longer an issue, everything is blocked as well. This opens up so much flexibility that I consider this buckler mandatory for a parry-focused playstyle. Parry's counterattack damage scales off of the evasion rating on your buckler, but since I advocate for a level 52 unique buckler, this damage will not scale that far. And also because the damage will not be that high, neither will the stun. Parry has a very high stun multiplier, but 1000% times 0 is still 0. What is not shown is that parry will interrupt attacks, including those from bosses. This is sometimes good, sometimes bad. When Chimera flies in the air and breathes fire, he is usually untargetable, but if you parry the fire, he instead becomes grounded and immediately tackable. The bad part is that it resets bosses' animations. Many bosses tend to have big end lags, but if you parry them, that interrupts that, meaning they will restart their attack faster. You can also parry many things that you would not expect. Spells for one, but also every rare modifier, like the elemental balls or the circles on the ground. Parry tends to be very inconsistent with red flash attacks. The rule is supposed to be, basic attacks and projectiles are blockable, but area skills and red flashes are not. But sometimes you can parry both of those, and sometimes you can't. The only way to know is to find out and die trying. Take this Jump and Rock clip. I cannot parry his overhead slam attack, but I can parry his ground beams. By walking into it while holding parry, I interrupt his slam. Parrying also builds your stun meter. With no investment, I could parry maybe 2 big attacks from a boss before getting heavy stunned. But just a little bit of stun threshold was enough to make this a non-issue. The real reason we're parrying is for the parry debuff. It is 50% more attack damage at a base, and this can be further scaled by parry debuff magnitude, found on the tree. With my build, I'm able to get 104% more damage. It could be slightly higher with some modifications. There is also an augment on gloves called Ulaman's Gaze that gives lucky crits against parried enemies. 104% more damage and lucky crits is nothing to scoff at, but there is a downside, and that is the duration is rather short. Even at max investment, I was only able to get 6.7 second duration, which is a fairly tight window to do all your damage. The parry debuff could also be consumed by 2 skills, Disengage and Fangs of Frost. Fangs of Frost is a fine spear skill that does some cold damage in an area. But Disengage, I think, is the real reason people hate parry. It throws you backwards, is rather finicky to use, and is sold to you as Spear's Frenzy Generator. I would be mad too if I had to use this to enable any of my other skills. But there is another and far better way to consume parry for charges, and that is through the support gem Frenzied Riposte. This lets any skill consume parry and generate frenzy charge, including parry itself. Socketing just Frenzied Riposte into parry and holding down the button while in a crowd will rapidly generate frenzy charges. This is even better when paired with Magma Barrier, also socketed with Frenzied Riposte. This is probably one of the better frenzy charge generators, but it is reliant on taking hits. With all that said and done, how good is parry to actually play with? You need a completely different mindset when playing a parry build. Most will follow a preset rotation in their skills, but if you try to do that in a parry build, you'll end up just standing around trying to get hit. What you need to do is have a reactive rotation, where you interrupt whatever you're doing to parry key attacks and then resume your combo. This requires more attention than most ARPG players are willing to give. Parry has more issues the further into the game you get. When my build was rather bad and not doing much damage, I got a lot of value out of parrying. It let me hit way above my weight class and gave a lot of value. I would get in these slap fights with bosses where I would parry every skill they did perfectly and constantly reset their attack patterns. But as my build got better, I naturally stopped parrying. I could kill rares without any buffs. It didn't make any sense to stop and debuff them. Parrying means you are not DPSing, and it's often faster to just spam attacks. Even I stopped using it to generate charges. I only really parried hard bosses or rares. Bosses also brought their own issues. Inconsistencies on what you can and cannot parry show up all the time, as well as realizing how dumb the boss AI is once you have to stop and look at it. The biggest problem actually was heavy stunned enemies. I can't parry something that isn't attacking me, so my damage would actually fall when I stun the boss. Parry did have a lot of use in dealing with rare modifiers, as they're all blockable. When a bunch of stuff was going off, I would just hold up parry and tank it all. It would also cancel some enemies' attacks as well. Parry feels like it was made more for the campaign version of PoE2, but not the current endgame. Maybe they'll change with the endgame rework, but as of now, stopping to not attack just doesn't make sense. I feel like I've gone down the full bell curve meme with parries, ending up back at the start. There is a use case for parry. The buffs are nothing to scoff at, and the ability to interrupt bosses have a ton of potential. I can easily see a speedrun strategy around interrupting key boss attacks to cancel a boss phase, but I think for most people, it's not worth the effort. If you want to play around with a low investment parry setup, I recommend Calgara's Arc in your second weapon set. Support parry with Frenzied Riposte, Steadfast 2, and Calling Strike. With this basic setup, you have access to decently fast frenzy charge generation and a call on command. You can also probably parry one boss attack without any stun threshold investment, but a little goes a long way with that. You can't really take advantage of the parry debuff without investment in duration or magnitude though. That's all about parry. What about the rest of the build? If you forgot, this video is actually a build guide for Whirling Assault Witchhunter, and I definitely overcooked with this one. Goal 1 of Witchhunter was to use as many weapon set passes as I could, and I ended up using about 40 of them. One thing I learned while doing this is that there really isn't that much stuff to diversify into. Almost every build refinement I did lowered the amount of passives I had split between sets. The second goal of Witchhunter was based around Sorcery Ward, one of the Witchhunter skills. With this ascendancy, you take a penalty to armor and evasion, but gain an elemental overshield based on that. With the node behind it also making it affect physical and chaos damage, you effectively have melee energy shield, but for hits. So I wanted to stack a lot of armor and evasion, and then I remembered a build tech I saw last league that I could use. Deflection rating was a stat added last league that gives you a chance to take less damage from hits, scaling off of your evasion rating. Almost all sorts of this are scaling from evasion rating, except for one. The unique boots Shankgon grant the exclusive mod 20% of deflection rating based on your armor. This comes at a cost, and a big one. The first mod is you cannot sprint. Remember before sprint existed? Well, you get to experience that again. Not only that, these boots have no movement speed, and your dodge roll is replaced with a Black Powder Blitz, a sort of rocket jump dodge roll modifier. I hated this dodge roll at first, but I started liking it more as I got to play with it. It's good for in-between pack movement, but very bad for long stretches of nothing. You will miss sprint. You actually have a ton of air control with this skill, and it can be used to get over groups of enemies. Since it also always ignites, you can support it with Commiserate to act as a ignite cleanse. The skill description also mentions it can detonate grenades, but this is not grenade exclusive. It can detonate anything that can be detonated. I don't know why it was written like this. Once we get over the lack of movement speed, we're rewarded with a ton of defensive layers. Since we gain deflection rating from armor, we can take Iron Reflexes to turn all our evasion into armor. And since we're no longer invading, we can take Glancing Blows to make our deflection chance lucky. With buffs from Scavenge Planing and charge regulation up, we have about 15k armor, which becomes 3k deflection rating. PoE sets it as an effective 51% chance to deflect. 48% of my armor applies to elemental from gear, and we have a 4.5k overshield from Sorcery Ward. This gives us a massive effective hit pool against hits. If you haven't noticed the problem here, Sorcery Ward, deflection, and armor protect against only hits. We have nothing to protect us against degens, and degens are the main danger in the current endgame. I honestly couldn't figure out how to deal with degens at all outside of investing in some instant leech and the flask nodes. It's not ailments either. We have decently good coverage with Black Powder Blitz Cleansing Ignite, and we're immune to bleed from one of our armor nodes. It's the puddles of degens on the ground that kill us. But that seems to be a problem for every build now. For offensive skills, we're using Whirling Assault and Bell. There isn't anything special here. You spin around and bell things. Whirling Assault got buffed, so its area is huge and the damage is now decent. Good for the most part, but there's some pretty bad pathing issues. I have lost 2 citadels now to Whirling Assault throwing me directly into boss AoEs despite clicking away from them. It does have a mind of its own at times. So does Bell as well, it doesn't ever go where you click. This is still a parry build, and you can interrupt your whirl with parry, but it seems to introduce a weird delay into attacking again. For reservations on the staff side, we have Scavenge Plating, Charge Regulation, and Time of Need. On the shield side, we turn off Charge Regulation for Magma Barrier. Magma Barrier is supported with Frontier to Post as well to help proc charges faster. I also added Infernal Cry into this build as a way to find something to do with my extra weapon set points. It doesn't really do that much and I forget to use it. Gear isn't that complicated. I tried crafting from Magic Base for the first time in this game. It cost 4 divs and I think I scammed myself. I probably could have just bought a better one for that price. On armor, I tried to get the highest armor evasion hybrids, while still getting some decent life, res, and armor applies to elemental. Gloves need to be pure armor because of a passive gives us evasion equal to armor on gloves. I didn't really keep track of the cost of anything, but it can't be more than 10 divines. Make sure you have a high item level Kalgara's Arc, as that controls how many support gems Parry has, and we need all the support gems we can. For the tree, I wanted to maximize the weapon set passives. As a reminder, weapon set passives can't take jewel sockets or keystones, so we have to pass them normally. Keystones are iron reflexes, glancing blows, and unwavering stance. We can't sprint or roll anyway, so there's no downside here, but I don't think it's really giving us that much. On the shield side, we take most of the parry nodes, minus the few that are relevant, like parry damage, and some of the Warcry nodes because I had extra. The staff set goes into two-handed attack speed and crit. PoE DPS is completely wrong. There is no support for any of the parry nodes, and it doesn't handle weapon swaps that well. There's also no support for sorcery wardies, so my EHP is wrong as well. Just use it as a build outline. Anything else? Oh yeah, Witchhunter has fizz pops. They're great. They work in Breach, Abyss, and Expedition, and they clear them out mostly by itself. That said, there really isn't a big point of this being a Witchhunter, outside of sorcery ward. I was trying really hard to use up as many weapon set passes as I could, and I just couldn't. Every improvement or refinement in the build always reduced how many weapon set passes I used. The baseline of 24 is more than enough. I could honestly see this build being played as a ritualist if you find a new defensive layer. How would I rate this? Probably a 7 out of 10, but mostly for creativity. I don't think a single other build is going to play like this. The damage was lacking, but I think most of that comes from the weapon. Parry build was an interesting concept, and I do like it more than I did from before. And I can see it has uses, but I also don't see it used past a certain level of player power. A lot of its strength is behind infinite parry and the infinite parry shield, and that limits its usefulness. The armor deflection tech, while strong, puts a lot of limitations on mobility, and that makes the build feel worse overall. Sorcery Ward was really good, but having no protections against degens made it feel like a wasted investment. I feel like it would be a lot better if it just covered all damage. And that's about all for this one. This was also the first PoE2 video I made. The performance is now good enough to be able to record, and this was probably also the first decent idea I had. The builds in PoE2 are kind of railroady, so there's not that much creative things you can do with them. But I'll find a way. It's getting better with more updates.